Welcome to Bridging the Business Gap, helping connect people, business and technology. Hosted by Jan-Hendrik Stricker and Phil Burgess.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Bridging the Business Gap with Phil and Jan. I'm your host, Phil Burgess, and on the other side of the mic is my co-host and friend, Jan-Hendrik. So, how's things, Jan? How's this week gone?
Hi, Phil. Yeah, great to be here again. Spent a nice week. I'm just coming back from a really nice trip to the German Alps. Mounted the highest summit in Germany with a friend, and I think that was a quite courageous activity.
Oh, what a good segue. What a fantastic segue. Because today we're going to be talking about, leadership courage. And, is courage in leadership really important? Okay. And I think it's great. It's interesting. I think as a native English speaker, courage is one of those words like value that people use a lot, but they don't actually think about what they're saying. So let me ask you, Jan-Hendrik. Courage. What do you think courage means? What's it really mean?
Yeah. So when preparing for this conversation, I thought before looking even up any definitions about courage, I asked myself, so what would I think courage means to me? And I felt it was something that it requires that you extend yourself actually in what you do, right? And the definition that I came up that makes most sense to me is like this. Courage is doing or deciding something that you can take responsibility for and that you are convinced of it needs to be done. Does that make sense?
I think that's good. It's almost like accountability then. But I think people often talk about, when they say courage, badge of courage or something, they talk about acts of bravery. More often than not, what comes to people's mind is like a soldier who gets some sort of an award or a medal. But in reality, there seems to be a difference between bravery and courage. Bravery, I've found, is quite often a sort of spur of the moment thing. It's almost like thoughtlessness. It's, you don't think about it. But maybe the difference is something to do with the fact that courage, you do something risky, but you actually are aware of the fact. And you might be afraid, but you still do it because it's the right thing to do.
Right. It's the right thing to do. And you need to be ready, as you said earlier, to take responsibility and accountability for what you do and all the implications of those actions. And I think that is what makes people be a bit in fear of being courageous, because they would not necessarily know what are the implications of the decision or the action I'm taking right now.
Do you think it's more important now, with this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous sort of environment where change is, it's the most extreme case of change and development I've seen for a long time. Mm-hmm. There seems to be that, the speed of change, but also this almost like inertia of fear where people are perhaps afraid of actually speaking up and doing something innovative. They actually would rather hunker down and stay safe.
Yes.
Do you think it's always been massively important, or do you think it's actually even more important now?
I think it's both, probably. I think it has always been important, but nowadays it's even more though, right? Because time flies even faster than it did in the past, I think, with the advancements in technology. So the notion of real time is actually the one that puts the responsibility of people in quite some danger. Because I think I have observed a lot of leaders in business act quickly because they feel pressured when they act, and then they don't really take the time taking a step back, analyzing a situation and taking an informed decision. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, and also which I have observed a lot, is for leaders to go into inactivity, into non-decision making mode because they fear that they haven't yet received enough information. They fear that their decision would not be informed enough.
So it's almost like safety. I mean, we talked about the difference between data-driven decisions and sort of initiatives.
Yes.
And intuition. The other thing perhaps is this, the competitive edge keeps changing and homogenization with AI, everything's faster. And people have got a lot of pressure at the moment to actually be seen to be doing stuff. But it would suggest that, that if you don't do something courageous, then you're going to end up exactly the same way that everybody else is. And you're going to end up that same way faster now. So, a lack of what you've talked about there stifles innovation, and that stifles basically the survival of a company, surely. Do you think courage has an impact on business? Do you think a lack of courage has an impact on business? How about that as a question?
Well, we've seen some cases in the past, right? And they have been quoted a lot. So I will use them again, and probably our listeners have heard those names a lot of times. But in this context, I find it still important to mention a company like Nokia, where I think Nokia did not lose because they couldn't see the future. I think they've lost because they couldn't decide fast enough to create it.
Is it about deciding, or is it about having the courage to take that leap?
I think it's about both. And in the case of Nokia, basically it was a lack of courage in the Nokia's management to see and to communicate that the technology they had built their success on up to Apple coming into the market was no longer the technology that will bring them into a successful future, right? Because they'd always been successful as they were by the time that Apple entered the market. So let's imagine if they had been there, let's imagine a CEO of Nokia and the board of Nokia at the time that Steve Jobs came aggressively into the market with a new platform. They would have said, you know what? We have been successful with what we have been doing right now until now, but this is not going to take us into the next 20 years as a successful company in telecommunication. And maybe we need to rethink everything.
But is it a stifling of innovation caused by courage? I mean, you could talk about Blockbuster. Apparently Blockbuster, when streaming was starting, Blockbuster actually, they had somebody who created the idea that said we should get into this streaming. And the board basically refused the proposal because a vast majority of their revenues were based on late returns of videos. So is it the environment now? I mean, Gartner say that courage has a massive impact on profit erosion, about 3%. Deloitte says it can actually reduce your margin resilience by about 50%. It has a big impact. But it strikes me that we're in the middle of almost like a VUCA winter. We're in the middle of a winter, and people think that you can actually hide in your cave until it passes over, till the storm goes by, because that's what's happened before. I'm not sure you can. And if you've not got the courage to actually move and go out and actually fight in that area, then I'm not sure you're going to survive. I think the other thing, of course, is this compliance fixed mindset culture that seen layoffs, people are afraid to take courageous decisions. It's almost like they used to say, you don't get fired for buying SAP. They used to say you don't get fired for buying IBM before that. Okay?
Yeah.
But courage, is it something that people are born with? Is it something that you have or I have, or, is it something that you actually inherently have or you don't have? What do you think?
Honestly, I believe much more in a company culture that creates a climate of curiosity, of teamwork, of security for people to just feel like they are invited and they can, because they are safe, share their thoughts, make suggestions.
Be allowed to fail.
And absolutely be allowed to fail. Right? A culture where failure is part of the experiment, an inevitable part of the.
People are afraid to fail.
Yes,
I think they're afraid to fail in the current environment, and be seen to almost be, or to stand out almost, the way of surviving. And I've heard it from a number of people is you put your head down and you just, you do what you're told. Point that we got to talk about here is it's not an inherent skill, because that's a fixed mindset mentality. What you just described is a growth mindset mentality. It's a skill. So, courage isn't something that you've either got or you haven't. It's something you can develop.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
My dad always used to say, he fought in the Second World War, my dad. I was a late baby. And he always used to say, well, people have either got courage or they haven't, is what he used to say. And, I've sort of come to maybe think again about that. I mean, what do you think about that? Is it something that you inherently have or not?
Well, I think it's something that you're not born. Definitely, it's not something you're born with. We're all coming from different backgrounds, and we all have different education. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that the people that you will be working with, the people that you work for in an organization, do come from those different backgrounds, and not everyone is the same.
I mean, as leaders, we've got that situation with everything, really, haven't we? I mean, I would say that it's probably a skill, and we should consider courage as a skill in the same way that we should consider intuition as a skill, which would mean that it can be developed and strengthened in people over time. Yeah. But one of the key things I would say is that it's a lot of stuff that needs to be done internally, almost psychologically. You have to ask people and help people develop it for them, So I think that developing your own personal courage is one thing that's important. And I think that's something I struggled with early on in my career, until I actually got guidance from a really good director about it. And I've worked on it ever since. I still have this little person who sits on my shoulder that I call Norm, who, when you're in a certain position, Norm comes up and says, oh, you wouldn't want to do that. Oh, that's a bit dangerous. But, okay. It's like having kids in the car. You listen, but you don't let them drive. So I think that's one thing I would say is, there are ways of doing it, and you need to work on it yourself, internal narratives, building your confidence, connecting with other people who will support you. And take small steps. Anything you can do, maybe take a small step, and you can always back it out. Just because you've gone down one road doesn't mean you can't turn around and go back again. So I think that's one of the key things.
Let me add to that. I also believe that, it's a skill that you can and need to develop. But also, I think you need to train and retrain. So throughout my career, when I was stimulated by an environment that led me to take those bold or risky, let's say courageous actions or decisions, most of times actually it produced also bold outcomes. But I also then went through times where I felt less safe. So my environment did not encourage me to be courageous, to take those courageous decisions or actions. And so I lost a bit. I felt like I was losing my ability to be courageous. I guess, as if, imagine you would have not cycled for 20 years and you're back on your cycle and doing the first 100 meters. You wouldn't feel that safe, maybe, right?
I like that analogy. It's a muscle, and you've got to exercise it, and you've got to get into a position to be exercising it. I mean, the other argument I'd say is if you don't feel like you're in a safe environment, psychologically safe environment, you've got to look long and hard. I mean, the current market is perceived by people who are in employment to be really tough and hard. Okay, it's always tough and hard, but the fact is, part of that is to make sure that you stay compliant. And in a fixed mindset in organization. But look, it is, if we say it's a skill, then as leaders, then it's our responsibility, accountability to actually develop it. I mean, you any thoughts about what you would do to actually develop that in the team and others around you? What have you found works to actually help build courage in the team and in others around you?
When you build a team and when you grow a team where people love to come to work and love to be part of this team, and they know exactly why, and the team fits into a wider organizational and work culture context in the organization, that is where people can develop their own courage or can develop courage in their own way. And I think that is it's a very personal thing. So it's never something that you cannot tell somebody to be or to become courageous. You can just inspire people to basically find their own way to what is going to be their courage, right? It's going to be part of their own personality, and it needs to be accepted. So actually, what you want also is to inspire people through your actions, through your thoughts, and it can be a bold statement in a discussion. It can be a proposal that is a bit out of the box, right? Especially if we are in the area of innovation, it needs sometimes some courage to propose the thing that might expose you, and get expert views, very critical expert views on what you think could work. It can be a solution to a problem that would require steering committees or alignment meetings, iterative decision-making processes with a growing number of people, or you just take that decision and you will just take responsibility for that action, right?
It's like any development, from people. Each one of them will have a personal path. They'll come from a place and they'll aim to get to a place, and they accelerate and the time it takes. But it does take time. It will take time, obviously, and you have to guide people through it, which is part of our role. But again, it's asking them to face their fear, but in a safe environment, but not too safe. So it's the usual leadership balance. Yeah, it's what makes leadership as much an art as a science, in my opinion. And if you aren't working in a corporate growth mindset, which a lot of corporates now increasingly aren't, they're compliant, autocratic type things, then create it in your team. It's the right way. It actually gets the best out of people and it gets the best for the business. So look, great discussion. Courage. So, okay, we talked about courage. Fantastic discussion. Is it important? Well, yeah, it is, definitely, even more so in this current world. And, if I was going to sum it up in a really gross, sort of oversimplified way, it's being afraid and yet doing the right thing anyway. Yeah. Okay. What are the three sort of things that you would recommend based on your experience about courage?
Well, as we said, I think the first thing I'd note is courage is not something you're born with. It's a skill, and a skill that can be developed. The second thing I'd say is it's not something you can ask people to do or to be. It's something that you need to develop in your own way. So building courage is a very personal journey. The last thing is, for me, very important, is for this to be a personal journey, to happen in an environment that is mindful, that gives you the assurance, your self-assurance, that gives you the security, and that encourages you to develop your own courage in your own way. And this, from an organizational development perspective, takes time. And you need leaders to persistently support, to grow that context in which people can develop in that way.
It's all about people, as always. And, those people will make your business successful and sustainable. Yes. Fantastic. All right, look, on that, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This has been Jan and Phil and Bridging the Business Gap. And we look forward to talking to you again next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Bridging the Business Gap, helping connect people, business, and technology. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Spotify or YouTube and share it with someone involved in business or technology decisions. You can also reach us at bridgingthebusinessgap@gmail.com.